your stability and handling comes from your supporting suspension components, what you see right here, and when they're worn, they can cause all types of unwanted symptoms in your 2009 through 2013 F-150. Now this kit of front, upper, and lower control arms with tie rods is a great solution to gain back some control in your steering and your F-150's ride quality with its durable OE style components and an inclusive kit where you can replace multiple components at once instead of doing it one at a time. I do want to mention that this set does not fit the Raptor model, so just make sure that you are getting the right set when it comes to your truck. This kit replacing both control arms and both tie rods makes for a huge improvement in the feel of your truck, especially if you're getting some wobbling, some flightiness with your tires, and some looseness with your current components. Now this set replaces 3 of those major components that can cause those issues, mainly due to stress on the ball joints over time or worn down bushings, which can be caused from more abusive situations or even something as simple as oversized tires. Now these all feature factory specs, so you can expect the same ride quality as the OE setup, and they all perform best at stock height. Now all these components here have a tough OE style build with durable steel and rubber components, and they feature a direct swap, so there's not going to be any questions asked when it comes time to install this. The ball joints are also a big refresh here compared to the old factory ones, with a tough rubber boot on each of them and a fully greased construction. And the inner tie rods also come with boots for protection, and the kit comes with all new hardware for a question-free install. Now this kit comes in at about $600, which isn't half bad considering that it's the entire kit rather than getting some individual components. Now there are single control arm kits that are around the same price point as this kit, so you're definitely getting what you pay for with the upper and lower control arms as well as the inner and outer tie rods, making this a solid deal for the price point. They're also solid OE style replacements, so they're not going to go over the top in price point anyway, making these a relatively affordable option when it comes to a necessary handling swap. Now install here is a 2 out of 3 wrenches on the difficulty meter. I definitely recommend having some mechanical experience and some specialty tools in order to get this job done easily. So with that being said, it should take about 3 hours or so with the right setup and the right tools for the job. At this point, I'm going to hand it over to one of our installers here. They're going to show you a detailed breakdown on how you can get all of this bolted up onto your F-150. So that wraps it up for what I have to say. Let's go ahead and get into the install.
Tools required for this install include a couple different size impact guns, hammer, clip remover tool, needle nose pliers, flathead screwdriver, caliper hook, 7, 9, 24, 27, and 30 millimeter wrenches, 15 millimeter and 21 millimeter ratcheting wrenches, an extension, 13, 18, 21, 24, and 27 millimeter sockets, a swivel adapter, 8, 10, 19, and 21 millimeter swivel sockets, a pry bar, as well as a large adjustable wrench and a vacuum pump. What's up guys? Today we're installing upper and lower control arms and tie rods on our F-150, so let's get started. First thing we're going to do is remove our brake caliper and our rotor. We've got 2 21 millimeter bolts on the back holding our bracket in that we're going to remove. I've got a caliper hook up here to hook my caliper up and out of the way, and then we'll pop this rotor off. Now before I remove the caliper, I'm going to remove our ABS and brake line brackets just to give us a little more slack, and then we can hang our caliper further off to the side out of the way. So I'm going to take an 8 millimeter swivel socket for the ABS bracket. And I'm just going to throw the bolt back where it came from. Make it a little bit easier and not lose your bolt. And then I'm going to switch to a 10 millimeter socket for the brake line bracket. Pop that out of the hole. Thread your bolt back in. And then you can grab your 21 millimeter swivel socket to remove your 2 caliper bracket bolts. Get a hand on your caliper before you remove the second one. And then wiggle your caliper off your rotor. I'm gonna pop this grommet out, giving me a little more slack on my brake line. Hook your caliper off to the side, up into the hole in the frame. Now with that caliper out of the way, you can remove your rotor. Mine just fell off the hub when I pulled my caliper off. If yours doesn't, take a rubber mallet in the cutout of the dust shield. Just give it some smacks until it comes off. Next, I'm gonna pop off the dust cap covering our axle nut and then remove that. Now you can use a hammer and a chisel here to get behind it because it is pressed in here. I've got a pry bar, that's gonna work just fine for this. Just get it right behind the lip, give it a couple taps, and hit it from different angles until it pops out. And then once you have it behind that lip, you can just give it a tap to pop it out. Now grab a 13mm socket and remove your axle nut. Next, we're gonna loosen up our lower ball joint nut as well as our tie rod end nut. So I'm gonna take a 24mm socket on my lower ball joint, 21mm socket on the tie rod. I'm gonna loosen it up pretty much until it's off and then just throw it a couple spins back on. Then switch to that 21. Just leave that a couple spins on for now. Now we're gonna come up to our upper ball joint, remove our cotter pin. So we need to bend back the tabs on it, straighten it out, and then just pop that out. Now we're gonna take a 19mm swivel socket, and we're gonna do the same thing up here, just loosen this up, leave it a few threads on. And then I'm gonna grab a hammer, I'm gonna strike the side of the knuckle here and give it some vibration to break that ball joint free. That popped out, so now we gotta do that same thing on our lower control arm, ball joint, and our tie rod end. So now we're gonna do that same thing on the lower ball joint, striking the side of the knuckle right here. Now I've got safety glasses on, just from the looks of this thing. I'm about to take a rush shower here. I can see that separated. So I'll come over to my tie rod end, do the same thing. Now we're gonna completely disconnect our ABS sensor wiring. So we're just gonna follow this from the knuckle all the way up. Take a clip remover tool, pop this clip out, follow it up to the next clip. Follow where it goes. It comes up here. Take a clip remover tool to pop it off that clip. And then we need to push this red locking tab back. Pop that out, press in on the black tab, disconnect it, and then snake it out of the way. So now we need to access the back of our hub. So I'm gonna remove our tie rod end and our upper ball joint. I'm gonna leave the lower on for now. I'm just gonna swing this down. I'm gonna throw my nut back on here just so I don't lose it. Pull down on the upper control arm while you remove that nut. So now just get a pry bar between your coil and your upper control arm. Pull that up and out. Swing that off to the side. Next, we need to pull a vacuum to disengage our four-wheel drive. So we have this vacuum line here that we're going to be removing. And then you're going to need some kind of vacuum pump to pull a vacuum on that to release it. So you can just wiggle off that vacuum line. And then there's going to be a thicker and a thinner one. You're going to go onto the thicker one. And then just pump this up, pull a vacuum. It's going to go to about 25. And then this spins freely without our axle moving. So we're good. We're going to tuck this off to the side so we keep that vacuum. Make sure you're not losing any vacuum. Still holding good there. So now we can move on with disconnecting everything. So now that we have our vacuum pulled, I'm ready to remove the knuckle. So I'm gonna support it while I fully remove the nut on our lower ball joint, and then I can lift it out and maneuver my axle out of place. So first I'm just gonna make sure I still have vacuum. I'm gonna need to pump that up a little more. Next, we're going to remove our lower strut bolt. I've got a 30mm wrench for the nut side and a 27mm socket on the bolt side. And then I'm just going to use the socket and pull back on the wrench to remove the bolt. Next, we're going to remove the nut on our sway bar end link out of the lower control arm. So grab an 18mm socket and remove it. Now we're going to remove our two lower control arm pivot bolts. Grab a 21mm socket with a swivel adapter for the bolt side and a 27mm wrench for the nut side. Now before I pull out my pivot bolts, I'm going to pry the strut and the sway bar end link out of the lower control arm so I can swing this down. It's just going to make it a lot easier to get these bolts out. So I'm going to get a pry bar right in between our strut mount and the bottom of our strut. Pry down on that, and then I can remove my bolts. And then get a good grip on this. Pull that other one out. And remove your lower control arm. So now we're going to move on to fully removing our strut so we can get access to our upper control arm bolts. I've got a 15mm ratcheting wrench, so I'm going to remove the 3 nuts at the top of our strut. I'm just going to leave that one on a couple threads until we get our other 2 fully removed so that it holds the strut, and then I'll remove that by hand once I have this supported. Now get a hand on the bottom of your strut to support it, fully remove that last nut, and slide your strut out. Next, we're going to take a 21mm socket and wrench to remove our 2 upper control arm bolts. I've got a swivel socket just to make this easier. And I will just remove our 2 bolts and wiggle our control arm out of the mounts. Next, we're going to get our tie rod out of here. Now we have this clamp back here. We're going to have to break that. It's a one-time use clamp. So get a flathead screwdriver that'll fit in there, and then you can start twisting and prying to break that free. And then we come to the front side of our boot, take some needle nose pliers to pinch that clamp. Remove that. Twist it to free it up from the rack. Now I'm going to try to twist and pull to pop this off the rack. If that's not working, just carefully get a flathead screwdriver back there and start working around the edge to free it up. Pop that boot off, and then we're going to work on sliding that down the tie rod. So now we're going to pull our boot back, and that's going to reveal our inner tie rod joint. Now we have hex cutouts on this, so I've got a very big adjustable wrench. If you don't have one of these, it's going to be a 40mm wrench. So just get that on there and break it free. I'm going to keep loosening this until I can spin it off by hand. And spin it the rest of the way off. So now we're going to get our inner and outer tie rods assembled on the table. Now typically you would remove the outer tie rod from the inner tie rod and count the amount of spins to get this to line up. Now ours is pretty rusted on there. This one thread looks like 8, so it's going to be really difficult to get that off. So I've confirmed that our inner tie rods are exactly the same length, and the threaded portion of our outer tie rod is also the exact same length. So we just need to get the exact amount of thread sticking out of here as we do on our other one, and that's gonna be good enough to get you to the alignment shop to get it professionally done. So I'm gonna get this assembled. I have my inner tie rod here. I'm gonna slide my boot onto there first. I'm gonna take a new clamp, slide that on, and then thread on my jam nut. And I'm gonna thread on my outer tie rod. These are side specific, so make sure you have the correct one that matches up. And I'm gonna thread that on until I have the exact amount of threads sticking out as I do on my factory one. Now we're getting pretty close. Now right there we have the exact amount. So I'm gonna twist my jam nut up against my outer tie rod. I'm gonna take a 24mm wrench for the jam nut and then an adjustable wrench to hold this outer tie rod. And I'm gonna snug that down. Now at the top of our outer tie rod, we need to thread in this grease fitting. So just thread it in by hand until it bottoms out and take a 7mm wrench just to give it a little more, snug it down. Now these are pre-greased from the factory, so we don't need to add grease. It also does not come with a little dust boot cover. I would definitely recommend popping one on there because these fittings like to collect everything that the road kicks up. Now we're gonna thread our new tie rod into the rack. Just thread it in until it bottoms out, and then we'll grab our big adjustable wrench to snug it up. So now we need to get our boot around the steering rack. Now our new boot is a little bit smaller, so we're gonna have to stretch this out. I've got it over the top lip. I've got a buddy holding it. I'm gonna get in there with a screwdriver and just run it around to get it all the way around our rack. Now that we have that in place, I'm gonna take a worm clamp, slide that into place, and tighten it up with a flathead screwdriver. Next, we're gonna install our new upper control arm. Slide that up into the mount and get your bolts through. Now with these bushings, you want to tighten them when your suspension is under a load. If you tighten them right here, when it's at droop, then once it sits down on the ground and gets raised, you can tear that bushing. So we're just gonna leave that like that for now and install our strut. So now we're gonna raise our strut up and get it into our upper mount. I'm gonna thread all three of my nuts on hand tight. Now I'm gonna leave that loose for now just so that we have a little bit of maneuverability to get this into our lower control arm. Now we're gonna install our new lower control arm. So get it up into your mounts. I'm gonna use a pry bar over here to help get my hole lined up. I'm just gonna tap my bolt the rest of the way through with a hammer. And I'm gonna thread my nuts onto the other sides. And then we're gonna raise this up to connect to our strut and our sway bar end link. Now I'm gonna swing this up. You wanna line up your sway bar end link to go through that hole, as well as your strut. And then we're gonna take the nut from my sway bar end link, thread that on. And then we're gonna need to line up our strut. Once you have that bolt started, tap it the rest of the way through. And then I'm just gonna take that nut, thread it on the other side. Now we're ready to throw on our knuckle. I've got my buddy, he's holding the vacuum pump and he's gonna throw that lower ball joint nut on while I get the axle into place here. Now I'm gonna get that nut onto my axle to hold everything in place, and then we'll move up to our upper ball joint. So now we can remove our vacuum. You can see our hub spins freely without our axle right now. So I'm gonna release that vacuum, pull that tube off, and now if we turn it, it should engage those splines and this should be locked into place. Now I'm gonna connect my upper control arm ball joint to the knuckle. And to be able to get a nut on there, we are gonna have to get a pole jack underneath of our lower control arm. Now we have a lift spacer on our strut, so if you didn't have that, you would be able to do this without putting a load on the suspension. Now while we're here, I'm gonna pop my tie rod into the knuckle. You might have to bend your ball joint. Thread on my castle nut. And now I'm gonna put a pole jack underneath the lower control arm to put a load on the suspension so I can get my nut on. So now I've got my load on my suspension. So if I pull down on my upper control arm, I should be able to get my thread started. So now that I have my nut threaded on, I'm gonna take a 21mm swivel socket and tighten that down. And I'll do that same thing for my outer tie rod here. Now one thing to note on here is we have a castle nut, so there's a hole through the stud and we need those to line up. So we're gonna tighten this down, and if they don't line up, you're gonna tighten some more until they do. You never wanna loosen that to get it to line up. And right there's perfect, so we'll grab our cotter pin and get that in. So now take your cotter pin, slide it through the hole, and then I'm gonna bend one side down and around the stud, and then the other side's gonna go up. Next, we're gonna come down to our lower control arm and thread in that 90-degree grease fitting. Just get it started in that hole, and then thread it in. Now once that's bottomed out, take a 9mm wrench and snug it the rest of the way down. And then I'm angling it over towards the side so it'll be easier to get a grease fitting in there to grease it up. Now just like our outer tie rods, these are already greased from the factory, so we don't have to do anything right now. Now we're gonna come to the bottom of our lower control arm and tighten everything up. First I'm gonna take an 18mm socket for our sway bar end link. And then I'll switch to a 24mm socket for our lower ball joint nut. And then a 27mm socket and 30mm wrench for our lower strut bolt. Now we're gonna grab a 21mm socket and 27mm wrench and tighten down our pivot bolts on our lower control arm. Now I'm starting with the frontmost mount because we don't really have a lot to pry on to get this lined up. I've got it pretty lined up with our hardware impression here. On the other side, we have room where we can pry, so we'll do that second. Now on the other side, we need to go in a little bit, judging by my hardware impressions. So I'm gonna take a pry bar up in the frame and pull this in until it's right where it needs to be. And then we'll tighten that one down. Now we're gonna go up top and tighten down our upper control arm bushings. Now make sure you still have that load on your suspension before you do this. I've got a regular 21mm wrench and a 21mm ratcheting wrench to do this. And then while we're up here, I'm going to tighten down our upper strut nuts with a 15mm ratcheting wrench. Now grab a 13mm socket to tighten down your axle nut. And then you can get your cover, get it started, and then just give it a whack with a rubber mallet to seat it into place. Now we'll reinstall our rotor. I'm going to throw a lug nut on just to hold that up against the hub, which will make it a little bit easier to get our caliper on. So I'm going to pull our caliper out of the way. We still have this vacuum line that we have to reattach. So just press that on. And then we can pull our caliper off our hook, slide it over our rotor. And then start threading in your bolts. Then grab a 21mm swivel socket and tighten those down. And then while we're over here, we can reconnect our ABS wire and our brake line bracket to the knuckle. Take an 8mm socket for your ABS wire. Switch over to a 10 for your brake line bracket. And then we'll run our ABS wire up to our plug. So now we're just gonna run our ABS wire up. We're gonna pop it into this clip on our brake line bracket first. And then we have a push clip. It's going into this bracket. We're gonna run this underneath of our brake hard line. To our next clip hole. And then plug it into your connector. Press in that red locking tab. And then we're just gonna be pressing it into these two holes in our fender liner from the back. And then you can repeat the whole process on the other side. So that'll wrap up this review and install of the front, upper, and lower control arms with tie rods for your 2009 to 13 F-150, excluding Raptor. Thanks for watching, and for all things F-150, keep it right here at AmericanTrucks.com.